Hello, everybody. Welcome to Pharmaceutical Soccer. So excited to be here. We're back to normal week, normal match day time. So excited to be here, of course, with Valer Shabila, Clay Trainum. You guys thought out yet? How's everything go? Oh, well, Valer, we don't have to worry about him being thought out because he just has to make that short track to the press box and not have to worry about the elements. But Clay, are you thought out yet? How's everything going over there?
Yeah, I will say it wasn't the coldest game that I've ever attended, but it was among the more unpleasant in terms like it was very funny. Over the weekend, I saw the memories, like Facebook memories of the New York City FC friendly that we went to at First Tennessee Park. And while it wasn't as like literally over the weekend was colder than that day, but it did nothing but rain the entire match. So I definitely know that I was colder at that game than I was at this one when it was all said and done. But we were very, 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 very layered up at the park.
Well,
And then by the end of it, I didn't feel like it was as bad as it could have been because I was wearing so many layers.
The press box has a window facing to the outside, of course, and my toes were very close to that side of the
oh
wall,
my God.
and it made my toes pretty cold, I will say. So there was that. Um, yeah, it was cold, but I think BJ Callahan really wanted to thank the fans because it's the first thing he opened his press conference with thanking the fans for sticking around and staying. And then a couple of the players also mentioned the cold and how grateful they were that fans were there showing up. So if you went to the game and stayed around for a long time, shout out to you.
One of the things that I thought was funny. So, as people know, my wife played college soccer. She talked about playing a game in South Dakota in like November. And it gave me some flashbacks to some terrible NAIA cold games. But the first thing that she pointed out when we were watching the game is that almost every New England player was wearing sleeves. And they're from, cold weather country. And not, I mean, maybe even half of the Nashville roster was going sleeveless, tightsless, like just living in the elements.
To be fair, half of Nashville's roster is from Scandinavia at this point. So,
That's fair.
they're probably used to it.
It
Well,
just caught me off.
outside of the
Go
match,
ahead,
how
Jim.
was your Blair? How was your weekend outside of the match? And then obviously we'll talk more about the match in a second. Other than that, how's your weekend?
It was all about MLS, and that's all I did pretty much. I just want to give a huge shout out to this to MLS doing this documentary thing. It's really interesting. It's called Onside, I believe. It's on Apple TV. Highly, highly recommend. I've already watched like 5 hours of it. I still have a few more episodes to go. It's 8 episodes total. So between that and watching the live games, which I think for the most part delivered, I think week one of MLS was pretty good. And honestly, that's all I did. I didn't do anything else.
My weekend was very different from Valaire's. Although I do want to say, like, I'm looking forward to getting into the MLS onside stuff. It reminds me kind of what NBC used to do when NBC first got the MLS contract before they went to Premier League and had much bigger fish to fry. But I went to go see the new Captain America on Friday. I enjoyed it. I had a good time. I know not everyone did, but I enjoyed it. And then Saturday, I had to be at the pub at 6:30 in the morning for the Everton game, which was annoying but fine. And then I gave 3 hours of campus tours, six tours back to back at the library. Then I worked an MTSU basketball game. Then I picked up my wife and we went to the NSC game. So it was a very long Saturday that followed up with me doing absolutely nothing yesterday, and it was great.
How did you watch the game, Steven?
On my phone, while I was at a wedding, because I was at a wedding, for a coworker over the weekend. It was extremely difficult, because it is weird how like it just when MLS weekend hits, it just hits, right? I was sitting there during the ceremony trying to pull up the scores and hitting refresh for LAFC and Minnesota as they were playing. Like, who else in their right mind would care about that happening, especially during a wedding? Me. I would. I especially would. I also want to give a shout out to MLS for doing Sunday night matches. Sunday night soccer is a lot of fun, and I'm so glad that they kind of changed some of that schedule up to have some matches on Sunday. It's very nice, but overall, it was a good weekend. You know, a little bit different for me, not being there for the home opener. But I think the thing that's exciting is that we are back. We are officially back. We're going to be back to our regular schedule, our regular content, our regular programming. Something that I know after this offseason that both Valere and Clay and I have been waiting for this to happen. And we've been waiting for this day, no matter how cold it was. What was it like going into another season like this, walking into Geodis Park? Like it's always like that first match of the season, it's always something different. To kind of just walk in, kind of feel that atmosphere again, feel like you are back to kind of your normal life. What was that first feeling like walking into Geodis Park?
I'm gonna give the boring answer and I'll let Clay do the more exciting answer. It felt like a continuation of last season because the off season was so short. That's how it felt. I wish there was a little bit more of a break. I honestly, it just felt like, all right, here we go. It's the same thing. But there were a couple new promotional videos, and God's Gonna Cut You Down by Johnny Cash is back on the menu. So,
Which,
you
by
know.
the way, what took them so long to bring that back? Like, why did they have to wait a full year to do that? Why did they have to wait a full year to bring it back?
Well, there were a lot of changes to the pregame. The riff was before God's Gonna Cut You Down, which actually feels more natural and less awkward, but does not feel like it's this type of star of the show that it was when it's right at kickoff. Uh, God's Gonna Cut You Down is always makes me laugh because once you notice the clap being off a beat, you can't not notice it. And so it starts to drive you nuts.
Oh, the welcome to
So,
my life as a capo and God's gonna
oh
cut you
yeah.
down was a thing. Like
Yeah, yeah, because you're on beat for one part, off beat for another part, then back on beat for the other part. But if you tried to switch to get on beat in the second part, then you'd be off beat in the third. So it's just like it's very confusing to watch. And from where I was watching, which was on the terrace instead of my normal seats, I was just keenly aware of it. I do want to say that I would disagree that it felt like a continuation of last season. Uh, for me personally, between everything that was going on with the on the field stuff, like switching over the roster, things like that, between things ending so poorly at the end of last year, and then hey, let's get the plug out while we can. We've started a media company since the end of last year. So it was like going into a whole new sort of thing. I was wearing a Farmer Boy shirt, which got a couple comments from folks. So it just felt like a new sort of thing, and I think part of that was the weather. I think the folks that I saw for the most part were the diehards, were the folks that you would see at a USL game. Like
which, by
it
the
was,
way, with that content, by the way, Valere, you and Ben have been pumping out like nobody's business this past. Like, are you okay? Are you tight? Like, are you exhausted from what you guys have been putting out?
It's been a sprint, and honestly, I haven't been writing half as much as I probably should. But Ben, Jeff, Ronan, Chris, even the photographers, I mean, Mike and Christine, I mean, everybody, and then obviously you guys, like Joel, Omar, like I can keep going on with everybody involved with this 615 stuff. It's been so cool to see, and I got so many sort of compliments on it yesterday, not yesterday, during the game or around the game time. So shout out to all of you. It's been good. It's been cool. We're gonna keep doing it.
Well, that's good. I mean, I'm glad I know that we're going to keep doing it now. I thought we were going to be done with it after this week. So thank you very much for letting me know that we're going to keep going through with this. I appreciate it. Um, what was your favorite thing about being back? Like, what was the one thing that you guys were excited about when it came to just kind of being back? What it could be team wise, it could be stadium wise, it could just be kind of overall vibe. Like, what was your favorite thing about being back? I'll go with
well,
Clay first.
yeah, for me, I mean, in addition to like seeing all these people that, are among my like circle of friends in Nashville, and I haven't seen a lot of them since the last game, it was having some excitement around NSC. We don't know how this season's going to play out. We think we have a good idea on how the season's going to play out,
We
but we
do.
kind of knew the last month or 2 months of last season that the season was, for all intents and purposes, over. Like we were going almost out of duty and out of wanting to see something uh hopeful, I guess, but more so in this, regardless of how things play out from here, it's a new season, it's new hope, it's new players. It's sort of you get energized just with the idea of seeing something that you haven't seen from NSC. And so like the favorite thing I took away is the feeling, going into a match and maybe thinking this is the start of something good, which nothing really happened in the match. So I'll go into the next match thinking this is the start of something good. So uh, that was the big takeaway for me because it really felt like we were just going through the motions towards the end of last year on, well, we go to the match because that's what we do, not because it's something that we're excited to do.
I think for me, and we'll talk about the technical and on the field stuff in the second segment, even more detailed. But for me, the my favorite thing to see was Whitemeyer and the reaction. So obviously, what he put on the field was amazing, but sort of the afterwards, seeing fans asking for his autograph and seeing fans asking pictures, and then the moment he shared with his parents right there, right after the game, I just, sometimes we get caught up in the technical stuff, and we kind of forget these little moments that these players have literally waited their whole life for, worked their whole life for. And seeing somebody get rewarded, when you hit 23-year-old and you haven't played professionally, chances are you're not going to play professionally in this game. I mean, it sucks and it's not a fair system, but that's what soccer is generally. So seeing him kind of reach a new height at this level, even though he was played with college, 6 months ago or whatever, I just thought that was really cool. And it showcases that, you don't have to be a big European signing or a DP signing. You could be, a guy who played college and worked really hard. And, you're able to kind of go toe and toe with these pros. And I just think that's a really cool thing to have seen.
Yeah, I showed the Google picture of the lineup to these guys where Meyer is not even mentioned by name on the lineup card at all. Every other player is named except him. And he's a player that came in signed on Friday, I believe, or Thursday as a defender, mind you. Not as a midfielder, as a defender. He was tweeted out by the club as a defender.
Yeah, no, he played. I mean, he played some midfield in college, but like he's a center back for all intents and purposes. But and I will say he's been with the season with the team the whole preseason, so it's not like he just came in Friday. But still, he didn't have that contract until very recently, and was able to start right away and perform. And I think when I think everybody, every single person, when they saw that lineup, they marked that as a weakness point, and it turned out to be the opposite of that once the game actually started.
Well, speaking of weaknesses, obviously we're going to talk more technical when we do get into the second segment. But when it comes to being back, also always brings concerns. It always brings questions. It always, especially seeing everything happen, like seeing everything firsthand. So, Clay, from your perspective, do you have any concerns, just kind of overall from the team perspective, overall from just kind of the anything that concerned you during that match?
I mean, honestly, the thing that sticks out to me, and I'm not really going to get into the match side of things until we get to the second segment. I do hope that this is a team that can kind of catch people's imagination in Nashville. I expected it to be kind of a sparse crowd. I really did because I know it's cold. But the sort of lack of excitement around the club uh, hasn't really been felt. I mean, or hasn't really, we haven't really seen much to get excited around outside of like our own little circle of soccer fans. And one of the things that stuck out to me is I was at someone's house before coming to the game and they forgot they had tickets to the game because it was the home opener. And I'm just like, oh, okay. And I think that speaks to the void that Nashville SC needs to be filling in the Nashville sports market. And I don't think there's anything particularly in that game that addresses that. It's a scoreless draw, not very exciting. It's cold. There weren't a ton of fans there. That's obviously looking at it in a very like glass half empty sort of way. And I don't think it's necessarily an indictment because I think the weather is the big X factor here. But that's sort of something needs to capture Nashville sports fans' imaginations. And I would have loved to be coming on here to talk about a win, not just because it's a win, but also because it's something that can get someone excited to show up in I guess 12 days time, 10 days time, whatever it is, for the next home game.
I think for me, the concern has to do with injuries. You signed Brugman to a big deal. Brian Acosta's coming in, and obviously everybody else, from the injury row, if you would, Yaz back as well. I think those are very important players for Nashville SC, and not having them, it's kind of a concern just going forward. How long is this Brugman injury actually going to take? I think it's kind of the big question here because he is supposed to be someone who starts for this team. So that's my biggest injury. That's my biggest concern coming out of the game. Otherwise, everything else I thought was more positive than not.
Yeah, Clay, I do think you make an interesting point, just kind of from the outside looking in, because I mean, just even from our circles and our friend circles, this is probably one of the most positive 0-0 draws that I think we've seen talked about when it comes to a team starting out. But then I think about it from the outside looking in, it's still a Nashville SC 0-0 draw at home. You know what I mean? So like I could see that excitement kind of, that waning a little bit, especially from after that home opener. But obviously, we're going to talk a lot more about the technical side. We're going to talk more about the match, as well as talking about stuff that happened throughout the league as it was the first week of MLS. And we're going to do that next, right here on Pharmaceutical Soccer. And we are back right here on Pharmaceutical Soccer at PharmaSoccer on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Also, please make sure you do check out 615soccer.com. Now that the season has started, there is going to be so much content going on, match breakdowns, stuff about players specifically. Like the content has been crazy. Like what Ben and Valaire have been turning out and everybody at the 615 team has been turning out has been so much fun. So please make sure if you just want to check out the free side of it, just even do that. We just want to see you subscribe to 615 Soccer no matter what. But if you do want to contribute a little bit more, you can do that at 615soccer.com.
And thanks to everyone that put in their prop bets as well last week. We had a few sneak in right under the buzzer right before the match started on Saturday. So keep an eye out on that.
Yeah, way more responses than I expected. Also, must I say, I'm really excited that we are going to have to create a new rule for the prop bets next year, as I have completely changed the game, as people have just.
You haven't really, though, because you just did what you've done before, but you did it with something that was realistic.
I
Yeah,
think I think that we have to wait and see the results before saying you changed anything.
that's
Yeah,
that's fair. That's
Yeah.
fair.
because you put 70 on Cameron Lancaster as first goal scorer, I believe, something crazy like that. And then you put a caveat on it so you didn't get it, even though you got it right.
Wasn't it was I felt like it was something more ridiculous. I don't know. But anyways, look, we'll get into the prop bets a little bit later in.
I
Uh
think Cameron Lancaster has gotten more mentions on this show in 2025 than he did when he signed with Nashville in 2020. Just so we're clear.
He's a second ever NSC signing. So, I mean,
And I think he got more mentions in 2025 than he did in 2020.
Look, we do actually have to talk about the Nashville SC versus New England Revolution match, our home opener in cold weather. Uh, Nobody predicted what it was going to be, a 0-0 draw, nonetheless. I do think we kind of take this a little bit more, not necessarily in order per se, just like I don't think we timeline match it out. I think we kind of break it down in segments a little bit. But I do think we need to start off with kind of first reactions to the lineup. I think it's one of those things where you're just going through, oh, Zimmerman, Lovitz, Jack Mayer, this makes sense. I had to do a double take when I saw Cochran and Wyatt Meyer in the midfield, trying to figure out what was happening. But obviously, injuries, all that kind of stuff played a part. I do have a question about the injuries a little bit. I'll tell you, and I'll ask that in a little bit. But what were your first reactions when you saw Meyer and Cochran on that lineup?
well, I think this is where I'll give credit to the folks that are writing about this team every day. They kind of set the stage for us to expect Cochran to play. I think that under a I think given the situation in years past, we kind of would have all went, oh, okay, whatever, like kind of water under the bridge. but I wasn't totally surprised to see him in the starting lineup because I think he had been talked about enough in the last 3 weeks that it seemed likely that he would play and start potentially. I was definitely caught off by Meyer. I think everyone kind of was. I was very much caught off by Kasim being on the bench, but I wasn't surprised because the visas, it's getting the green card takes forever, but getting the visa is not always that difficult for folks coming in, especially because they're athletes. But so I wasn't totally surprised by that, but and they were just their off season is very similar to MLS. Like they've just started playing recently, so it's likely that he would be match fit if he got here and got things sorted. So I was excited to see so much change at the start, and um, I was also kind of, and this goes into, we'll talk about this side of it later, but I thought it was interesting that the guys that the club is built around, the designated players, the big players in the squad, still felt every bit like they're the most important people on the pitch in terms of the way the game played out. So it really felt like things fit together well. If it wasn't fully successful, it does feel like everything fit together well. The focal points were still the focal points, and the folks around them were better about creating positions for them to be successful. And that's the thing that I really noticed for a team that's playing, kind of its first real match together. It looked like they kind of played together well. And that's hard to like elaborate too far on, other than like if you watch it, you'll know what I'm talking about. But that's what stuck out to me.
Once we got the injury report on Friday, I think it became clear that Cochran will get a shout. I think a lot of folks, shout out to Chris Ivy, who wrote a piece about this, thought that he would get his debut just simply out of options because Nashville just doesn't have anybody else. I think what a lot of people expected, including myself, was that maybe Taxeth drops in right next to him in that defensive midfielder role, and one of the more sort of senior folks ends up playing in that attacking role. I think Wyatt Meyer, just like Clay and everybody else, I was shocked by him, but uh, I think for me, once you saw that team sheet come through, it eventually made sense because the last two preseason games, that's pretty much what they started with, pretty much player for player. And then what really stuck out to me is kind of like Clay was saying, is that, yeah, you have these 3 or 4 new players making their debut, but they're surrounded by players, some of which have been here since 2020. And I think that says something about the rebuild of this club and the way they're going about this rebuild, which is not just like Frank to get everybody out, everybody in. There's a little bit more core and there's a little bit more continuously, even though it didn't necessarily, it's not necessarily like the same exact crew. It is still a good amount of year to year sort of turnover.
Blair, I do want to ask you quickly, just because the injury report was a little bit concerning, but one of the things that you mentioned kind of during preseason was the intensity that BJ Callahan brought to this preseason in comparison to other ones. Do you think that intensity for the preseason has something to do with how the injuries were kind of come out, or do you think we're just kind of a victim of circumstance at the current moment?
It's possible. It's possible that it has to do something with it. I think a lot of it has to do with not being match fit and taking a little bit of a break. And I think some of it has to do with the congestion of fixtures. You look at a guy like Brugman, who was playing, well into November, versus coming back from injury even. His break was a lot shorter than most people. And then when you look at, the I will say this, the training staff, they have a brand new like physio team altogether, pretty much, from what I understand at least, and they take that stuff seriously. There is a limit. They don't push players past their limit. They are challenged. The players are challenged. But I remember last year when we talked to BJ, he made a very clear point of like finding out where each player hits that limit and push them to that limit, but not go past it. And I mean, it's honestly like an art and a science at the same time. So it's not like for sure, but but there are some experts working on that stuff, right? So I think I'll take the experts' take on this rather than mine in terms of that, and I think it's more about match sharpness plus fixture congestion rather than maybe being pushed too hard in training.
Well, and it's one of those things like injuries at the start of MLS season aren't particularly rare. I mean, last year we were very excited because it was going to be the first year where we got to see everyone early because they were going to have to start training early for CONCACAF Champions Cup. And then what happens in CONCACAF Champions Cup? We immediately see the team go through a number of injuries. And so I think that it's definitely tied into the schedule to some extent, having such a short offseason. But we're used to sort of a gradual build into seeing the full squad, even in years where that hasn't happened. So I have to think that there's a lot going on here that we aren't necessarily privy to, but making sure like MLS 9 teams make the playoffs, like there's no need to really push hard in February if it'll make things go smoother in April and May.
Yeah, absolutely. Quick, thank you guys for that. Appreciate that. Quickly, let's talk about how I want to kind of break this match down. Is I kind of want to break it down just by kind of player group and category. And I think the first way to do this from a Nashville perspective, let's talk about the new players that did start that start came in, all that type of stuff. So let's start with Eddie Tagseth and Andy Nahar. When it came to them kind of being in the starting lineup, from what we've seen from preseason, it wasn't necessarily a surprise. But how did those new players kind of come into that Nashville atmosphere, and how did they do for you?
Well, I know that Valair was the most excited about Andy Nahar signing, probably more excited about Nahar signing than he was about an Iraqi guy signing, which tells you how excited he was about Andy Nahar signing. But I do think that it's rare that we've seen a player come in and we know is going to fit perfectly. And sometimes we think a player is going to fit perfectly, like a Sean Davis, and they don't at all. But Andy Nahar fit in so well. To me, he was the player of the match. He was involved in everything. He looked good going forward. He looked dangerous going forward. He looked really good defensively. I mean, Nashville as a whole looked good defensively. But Andy Nahar, so long as he can stay healthy, it has been like I think we'll look back and point at him as like one of the best signings that Nationals made in recent years. Because if he can stay healthy and play like that, and he didn't play particularly out of his mind, that's the way Andy Nahar plays. He fit pretty perfectly into what Nashville wants to do, and so he stuck out in every single way watching that match for me.
And sticking with that right side, I mean, him, Eddie Taxeth, and Hani Mukhtar just looked like they were on the same wavelength the whole game. And I said this on my instant reaction, but if Nashville keeps playing like that, the goals will come. I know the goals didn't come this time around, but it's honestly a numbers game. The more chances you create, the more you'll score. And Nashville were able to create some really high quality chances, especially from that right side. And that started a lot of it with the pressing and repressing of Eddie Taxeth and what he's able to do. We talked about it every time I went to training in the preseason. He was the standout player. Every single day I went to training, he was the standout player. And now seeing it in game just proves how much of a difference a player like that makes. I was describing it to some people. I've used this a couple times now, but I'll say it on the show for the first time. He plays soccer like a Beyblade. Like he's everywhere, and he'll go left, he'll go right, he'll go middle, he'll go back up. He'll go wherever he needs to be. But it's not frantic. It's not just crazy running. It's with a purpose. And BJ Callahan mentioned that he had to pull him off because he started having some cramps. If I played like he played, it would take me all of 35 seconds. My body would just like give up on me. He plays with so much intensity and so much purpose, and usually players who play like that may be lacking a little bit from a technical standpoint, and I don't think that's true for him. He's technically sound, and he's able to make these runs. And I don't want to say it. Maybe that puts an unfair sort of weight on him, but he reminds me a lot of Dax McCarty, in all honesty, in that body shape, I guess. He's 5'7". I think he's listed at 5'7". 5'7" smaller guy kind of gets in your face, is all over the pitch. I do think he's different in terms of player profile in general, but a lot of times when I saw him making those runs, especially off the ball, it really reminded me of Dax McCarty, and I thought what he was able to create with Hani Mukhtar is the best sort of combination play we've seen Hani Mukhtar play since maybe CJ Sapong in 21. Is that fair to say? Like is that too much? Because the way he combined with Hani Mukhtar just looked really flawless to me.
I think we do have a little bit to go, right? I'm with you where I do not want to put all of this pressure on, a younger kid coming into the league specifically. But I do think even just watching him play, Nashville has potentially found a bona fide star in Major League Soccer. Like even not even just from just his playing perspective, the way he carries himself, on and off the pitch, Nashville might have found a star with Eddie Tagseth. And it seemed like he kind of was living up to the hype, that we were bringing up to him this first match. Like I love your comparison of him playing like a Beyblade. Wasn't afraid to get in other players' faces too, which is something I respect very much. That the competitive side, that kind of fight and fire that Nashville in some ways didn't seem like they had last year, don't even have to question that this year with a player like Eddie Tagseth on the pitch. And I think he kind of brings that, that fire to the younger guys as well, which two other guys that we do specifically have to talk about was that with that midfield would be Cochran and Meyer. Was not expecting it, but how did they handle the pressure?
I think we talked about both of them quite a bit already this episode, and they deserve the props. And I thought they played really well. But I think what stuck out to me is that how the team played around them. The team didn't play in a way to quote unquote protect them or not pass them the ball in sticky situations. The team treated them like equals. And I think that responsibility started with BJ Callahan, treating them like equals to start with, to put them in the starting lineup. So when the team saw that this is a starting lineup, the rest of the players didn't bat an eye. They didn't look at that and say, "Oh, this is a 23-year-old in his first professional match," or "This is an 18-year-old playing in his debut in front of the most fans probably he's ever played in front." They didn't say that. They passed them the ball. They were able to progress the ball. And I think one thing for these two players specifically, they were they were really good in facilitating the play and getting it to the right areas, right? They weren't the ones maybe creating, but they were the ones getting it to the creators. And then I do want to separate these two because Meyer is a different player than Cochran. So I don't want to always combine them both. But I will say, last thing before I pass it on, is that there were a couple mistakes from both of them, but especially Cochran. Uh, and the way he responded to those mistakes, I think, says a lot for his mentality because he came back and was confident again on the ball and was taking responsibility again for the play. So I think that's something that's really like a top professional should have, and he definitely has it.
Yeah, and that's kind of leading into what I was going to say. I do think that I want to preface everything by saying that both of them played very well, especially considering the circumstances. That being said, that this should be the bar. Like they did have some lapses, they did have some mistakes. That's expected. You're going to get that when you play young players. You shouldn't see it over time happen again. Like this is something that they should improve upon over time. And provided that that happens, you look back at this and say like that's a sign of things to come. And so I think that I phrased it on Twitter as being a bit disjointed. That wasn't meant as like an insult necessarily. It's just meant as an expectation of what you'd have in young players playing in their first game. And so there's a lot to look forward to. One of the things that I was thinking about in my head, now this is in a different position, but I think it speaks to what Blair is talking about, is you look at Jack Mayer's progression, right? Like he came in, and one of the first things, I mean, we had him here on this show when he went on loan to San Diego, was that Landon Donovan told him, when he's on the ball to be confident and like to not worry about the other stuff, to just be confident on the ball, because if you're confident on the ball, you'll be more successful with, what's being asked of you. And we saw, Jack Mayer as a young player now, unfortunately, a few years ago, uh, kind of build within that to the point where he's making a salary that maybe is a little higher than Nashville would like to pay for what they're getting. But I do think like that is something that speaks to being a good professional is making that mistake. Meyer had a tough moment towards the end of I believe it was the end of the first half, maybe like 40th minute thereabouts, with a bad giveaway in a bad spot that fortunately Nashville did not, have to concern themselves about too much. And then Corcoran lost the ball in a few places. And these are things that happen. These are things that especially happen to young players who haven't played at this speed or at this level before. And so I think that you should be giving praise for the matches they had. I think that they had very good matches that should be celebrated. I also think that if they were to have this exact same match in a month from now and not show any level of improvement, that's a point of concern, but you can't project that. So I think that this is something good for both of them to build on, and hopefully it'll be even better a month from now.
And I know we're moving along, but another young player who came in, I think this is a good segue into, is Ahmed Qasim, who a lot of people didn't expect him to play. I definitely didn't expect him to play or even be on the match day squad, but he was, and a lot of it was out of necessity, but also he's an U22 initiative contract, and Nashville want to make him play. And I think what Nashville tried to do with him is maybe bring him into a new environment where he can excel and play even more than he was in his old club, to maybe find that pathway back into Europe. But because I do think that's kind of where he wants to land eventually back. But I think what he provided right away as he came in is that directness, and that directness was so clear in the way he played it. And he created two chances right then and there in the last, like, not even 10 minutes. So it was honestly really, really good to see a young player be that confident and in his very first match, even though he's only trained like once or twice. And I think going forward, what something that stuck out to me is that he was willing to do the defensive work as well. So going forward, I can see him taking over that left attacking midfielder spot, kind of opposite of Taxeth. Even though it was Alex Muyl who we praised for his defensive work, it seems like Qasim is willing to do that work, even if not as well at the moment. But his sort of tendency to lean in a little more centrally allows him to play a little bit more wide, and also drop in, and allowing Sam Sturridge to go a little bit to the left if needed.
And I think what really stuck out to him is the versatility that we've talked about with him before, because he comes in that first chance. I mean, I think it may have been his first or second touch of the ball, Nashville gets a chance out of. But then you saw that happen. I believe it was from the right side, but then the next time you saw him, he was on the left side, which speaks a little bit to the way that he and Tag Seth can kind of move around and be effective in the spaces where that they want, like where they want to operate, which could help Nashville be a little bit less predictable on the attack. And that's something that BJ has talked about quite a bit, honestly, the last year or so, is the versatility in the players, which we've seen, in the way this roster is built, but the versatility in sort of how you attack, to have like a sort of playing style and way that you do it that isn't necessarily constrained by the position that you're placed in on the field. And so I think that Tag Seth and Qasim are like send ups and tributes to that idea that you can you are effective wherever you play, and finding ways to be effective wherever you play. And Nashville for years has been very predictable. If they aren't getting a goal, how they're going to attack. And so having guys pop up in different places and be effective in different places makes them less predictable, which in turn makes them a better attacking team.
Yeah, I think one of the things that had been established with the young players for this match specifically, is the confidence going forward in this team. Like, I think when we kind of started this season, there was a lot of questions about how these young players were going to play. And, putting, Cochran and Meyer in that situation where they're starting their first MLS match, it's kind of insane, right? Like, it's kind of a crazy thing to have happen. And to me, it just kind of builds confidence in what Nashville 2.0 is doing and putting trust into these young guys. Because I think when Qasim did come onto the pitch, I think there was immediate impact. It wasn't a player that you're worried about how this signing was going to affect. Is he the real deal? Is he not? No. he made an impact right when he came on, and he was only on for 10 minutes, and he was, he barely had time to warm up with the team and had good interaction with the rest of the team. So I think it's very interesting going forward how that confidence continues to portray with BJ and with the rest of Nashville and its fan base.
I think one thing that BJ mentioned that was really stuck out to me after the match is that he said, and I'm paraphrasing here, but essentially he wanted to show that there's more than one pathway to play for Nashville SC. And I think that's such an important point because if you look at that lineup, you got your three DPs, each one of them had a different pathway. And then you look at your domestic center back, domestic left back, right? Came in through college, draft, all that. You look at a couple U22 initiatives in Yazbek and Qasim, who came in from Europe. You look at a college draftee who's just making his professional debut in Meyer. You're looking at an 18-year-old they bought from USL in Cochran. When you look at this team, there are so many different ways that they've assembled this
Simple.
squad, assembled this squad, and I think that's something that maybe we didn't see as much from Nashville SC in the first few seasons, and I think this allows people to see that hey, I have a chance of making it to this roster, or if Nashville SC go and try to sign somebody, they can show proof of someone with similar situation making it and playing, and I think that's very important going forward.
Well, and I think one of the things that gives the ability for these younger players to kind of just progress and is the fact that we have experienced DPs that are in this league that are able to provide that backbone and help out with the mistakes. And I think the DPs is the next thing that we do need to talk about with the team when it comes to Sam Surridge, Hani, and Walker. Um, Wow. If Walker was trying to make a statement about if he's the number one center back, one of the number one center backs in this league, and that he's worth the money that he's being paid, the questions that we were talking about in the beginning of the season, I think in one match he kind of shut up some of those people.
That's exactly what I was going to focus on. I don't think that Ani or Sam had a particularly bad game by any means, but my goodness, Walker Zimmerman was dominant. I mean, that is as good as you can play by a center back in a game is what he did. I mean, the only thing he didn't do was score. I mean, he this was a sort of the classic game that you expect from a center back who is a designated player, which are a rare that's a rare thing in MLS to have a designated player who's a defender, especially a center back. And that performance from Walker Zimmerman, if that's repeatable, the national team fans won't much care for that, but he'll be back on the national team if he continues to play like that because it was a dominant performance from a guy that honestly we kind of take for granted sometimes being in there. And now he's given us reason to take it for granted. Like we shouldn't forget that. But like when he's at his best, there are a few in the league that have ever been better in MLS.
And I think when you look, and I know it's a cliche, but when you look at how he makes players around him be better, I think the number one name that always pops in people's minds is Jack Mayer. Because Jack Mayer looked like he took a step to the right direction after last season, which I think we all can agree was a little disappointing from his perspective. In this game, he seemed like he was up for it. He seemed like in a good connection and good communication with the rest of the backline and Joe Willis. And I think a lot of that has to do with Walker Zimmerman's presence there. So I think when you look at a captain like that, you're definitely looking at how he impacts players around him. And given that confidence for Jack Mayer is a huge, huge step for this team who used to be, those were the players who kept everything in check before the forward scored and all that.
Yeah, and just real quick to add to that, when you're going to be a team that's going to play a lot of young players, having a veteran center back who's one of the best in the league that can help erase minor mistakes or big mistakes even just makes everyone more confident going forward. Like it is the best security blanket that is available in this league is a player like Walker Zimmerman on your back line.
So from preseason to first match, we were all wondering how it was going to go. The questions that were had, what did we learn about this team from this first match specifically? Like, is there a specific thing that you learned about this team that you maybe did not know from preseason going forward?
I think that they are a lot more daring. than we've ever seen Nashville SC, and that takes a lot of risk. They're willing to take that risk, and I think on the possession, on the ball, I know we kind of knew it was going to improve, but the level of which it improved to when they have the ball, I think kind of caught me off guard a little bit. So I think that's from a positive standpoint. That's where I would land, and then from a slightly negative standpoint, I think playing out from the back was a little scary at times. I think Joe Willis and maybe even the defenders, maybe something needs to happen there to where getting a goalie who is a little more familiar with playing with his feet might be helpful. There were two or three moments where you're holding your breath a little bit because Joe Willis might have given it away. And I don't want to put all the blame on him because it has to do with everybody else around him as well. But those are the two things that kind of on a positive and negative end that I thought about on the drive home, if you would, from Geodis Park.
Yeah, I mean, that's not totally different from my big primary takeaway from on the tactical side is Nashville was creating chances in possession that were not necessarily the types of chances they would create in possession in years past. Typically, if Nashville was having a game where the opponent was willing to cede 55, 60% possession because all Nashville is going to do is send in crosses, that's what we would see. And so I think we saw a lot of different wrinkles. I do think that sort of the DNA of what makes a good Nashville team hasn't totally changed. I think that their best chances were all off counters, all off forcing turnovers off a press. I think that Nashville looked its best in those situations. I also feel a little bit bad for Alex Muyl, who twice was completely unmarked inside the 18 and no one could see him on some of those breakaways. So if Valera's going to get his goal contribution bet with Alex Muyl, he'll need to be seen a little bit more in those spaces. But I do think I have a lot more comfort with the idea that Nashville is going to find chances that are not just crosses, aimless crosses into the box when a team is willing to give them 60% of the ball.
I I know we're running out of time. One thing I do want to mention is that Nashville did score a goal that was called offside. It would be really weird if we go through a whole episode and not mention that. Yes, Clay.
I just want to say that if it was called on the field, I don't know that it gets overturned.
Yeah,
And
I don't think it would have been much of a difference one way or another because it was such a close thing. And there are
well,
technologies out there.
and it sort of gives you the annoying end of it because I think that if Nashville's goal would have been called on, like the clearly offside New England goal was, we would have seen something a little bit different in coming out of this game because I think that that call for the Nashville goal was very, 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 very close. I'm still not fully certain, but the New England goal, I couldn't believe they let stand for as long as they did because I was like, I watched it live. I was like, he was 2 yards off, like it wasn't even close. And so it's just interesting that in the same match, those two happen. And if they had been reversed on the calls, Nashville wins the game 1-0,
Oh,
in my opinion.
oh, Steven, what did you learn from the match? Oh, no big deal. Just doesn't matter what I have to say. That's fine. You guys take all the time you want.
Just say yup.
What?
Just say yup.
Yep. Look, we made it through. We did make it through the first match, though. And now we're back into the regular season. We have another match coming up this weekend that we do need to talk about, which we are going to, as well as just some stuff around the league. We're going to do that next, right here on Pharmaceutical Soccer. Again, we are back here on Pharmaceutical Soccer at PharmaSoccer on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and 615 Soccer, of course, 615soccer.com. Make sure you go check that out. There'll be a lot more coverage this week. Join in on Fantasy MLS, which I'm doing awful at already to start the season. So, yay, good for me. Look, it was the first week of MLS matches, 2 matches on Sunday, which I really appreciated. Like Valaire said, kind of in the first segment, I thought it was a really good week of soccer, a good weekend of soccer, at least to start out. Did anything stand out to you both when it came to this week? Any scores specifically that you want to talk about that were maybe shocking?
There were a couple really wild ones. Philly went to Orlando and got a win, and San Jose slapped RSL 4-0 at home. Bruce Arena does it again. Incredible to see that man back in MLS. It's what dreams are made of.
I don't want to like it. Well, I don't like Bruce Arena, but I cannot deny that he comes in and just does so well with whatever team he has.
I want to be on the record. I love Bruce Arena. So opposite to what Steven says, I'm so excited. I'm so excited to have his snarky comments at reporters. I'm so excited. I'm so excited to see a team that has the power of friendship winning over a team that's like, I'm a tactical mastermind type of thing. Let's be honest, guys. This is a simple game. Bruce Arena brings it to its lowest sort of simplicity and wins stuff because that's what it takes. He's like kind of like the Ancelotti of MLS, I think, and it's how I see it. You have your Pep Guardiolas of the world and you have your Ancelottis of the world, and I definitely lean towards the Ancelottis of the world because these players already know how to play. You just got to put them in the right position, know their kids' names, and wish them happy birthday. You know what I mean? Anyway,
And wish them happy
I'm gonna clip
birthday.
that. That's a good one. But all that said, there were a couple other things. I think the biggest thing is the expansion team, San Diego FC, coming in and beating LA Galaxy in their home. LA Galaxy did not lose a single game at home last year, and they lost their first one this year against an expansion side. So shows you the growing pains of MLS. And I think for San Diego, yeah, shout out producer Joel Godoy masterclass. I thought he played really good. And at 35 starting a game at that magnitude and delivering and getting a yellow card is the most Anibal Godoy thing. So shout out to him. And in terms of San Diego, they played really well. And if you watched that game without knowing who is who, you would have thought San Diego was the defending champs and LA Galaxy were the expansion team.
I think one of the big ones that stood out to me, obviously Atlanta getting 2 goals from the record signing, winning 3-2 is interesting. But Sunday was the real headline day. Not only did you have the San Diego win, you had Vancouver scoring 4 goals. A lot of people are down on Vancouver, myself included, this year. And I mean, the first month is a lie in MLS. Like a lot of stuff happens in the first month that wouldn't happen after the first month. We see it every year, but those the two most interesting results from the weekend for me are those two results. And the last thing I want to add to the San Diego talk is San Diego's first year squad, LA Galaxy, one of the most successful club in MLS history. And the most annoying thing about MLS in terms of trying to prognosticate on it is also one of the best things about MLS, which is the club that didn't exist a year ago beats the most successful club on the first weekend. And it's surprising, but it's not shocking because that type of stuff does happen in the league. Anything can happen in any given weekend, and it drives you nuts sometimes, but it's also what makes the league so compelling to so many people.
And just lastly, on the Atlanta note, I mean, it looks like spending money on strikers really pans out because Denke in Cincinnati also gets the winning goal there. A lot at Atlanta gets 2 goals, gets a brace there. I forgot his name in Orlando. He scored a brace as well at home, even though they lost 4-2. Ivilic, maybe. Spending money on players who score will score goals. That's really the headline of week one. Oh, and don't play from the back because man, Jordi Alba and co were there another level on giving goals for free.
Yeah. Messy meltdown in week one. You love to see it.
He had 2 assists in Messi meltdown week one. It's always a good time to see how that works out still. I think it's going to be extremely curious if Columbus is actually really good or did they just play Chicago? And is Chicago still going to Chicago? I think that's fairly interesting. But another thing that happened, another team going in, well, I guess they wouldn't be. Cincinnati ended up beating the Red Bulls, the team that we are playing on Saturday in New Jersey. Look, the Red Bull, we've all thought about this game as being a loss. I have put a lot of investment into this match being a loss. I'm curious, do you guys still feel the same way after Nashville SC's first match?
think I'm between that and a draw, in all honesty. I don't think I saw enough from Nashville SC to say they can go into Red Bull Arena and, you know, fight off the bad juju they've had there for since they existed as a
Sports
club.
Illustrated Arena.
Was that?
Sports
Sports
Illustrated.
Illustrated Arena.
Oh, come on. Yeah. Forgot about that. Sports Illustrated Arena. I don't know. I don't know if I have that much confidence in NSC, maybe not yet. I do think it's gonna be closer than maybe I was thinking, just based on how these teams showed up in week one. But I think Red Bull still has ton of talent, and losing 1-0 to Cincinnati away from home isn't gonna like make me change my mind about this team and how good they are.
Yeah, I mean Cincinnati, I think their XG was over 2 in that game. Like the you look at the stats and you don't look at XG, you're sitting there going, like, oh, it's a pretty good showing from the Red Bulls. But uh, it's hard to get excited about a game in New Jersey because Nashville hasn't typically had a lot of success in New Jersey. I will say that if they generate the chances that they did between Honey and Sam Surridge away to the Red Bulls, they have a pretty good shot at getting something out of the game. And so I feel a little bit like more confident that Nashville can get something out of this game than I did before, Saturday. But it's still a very tough ask for a team that's still dealing with issues, for a team that's still kind of transitioning style wise. But I do think that they're going to put on a good showing. And I think that in the locker room, like, let's be honest, we know how these things work. Pretty much everyone thinks that Nashville's not going to perform well against the Red Bulls. And if you're looking for motivation, everyone thinking that you're not going to win is pretty good motivation. Like for a team that will be looking to prove something this first month of the season, which BJ Callahan, Mike Jacobs, all of them are going in to these games looking to prove something. Whether or not it happens is, remains to be seen. So I wouldn't be surprised to if Nashville somehow managed to get something out of it.
Valair, real quick for you, I do have a question just coming up for this week, and then I want you to go into your plugs and predictions as well. When it comes to the injury report, does it seem like anybody is going to be coming off that injury report before Saturday hits? And then give me your plugs and predictions.
I will say Yazbek was listed as questionable rather than out. So if you're looking at positive signs, that's probably one of them. Though we don't really know. We talked to BJ Callahan on Thursday, so I'll definitely be asking him what's going on there. And then Friday is when the actual injury report comes out. I wouldn't be surprised if Yazbek's back in the fold. Brian Acosta, I wouldn't be surprised if he's back in the fold. I would be shocked if Brugman is anywhere near that 20-man roster going to New Jersey. Just he's played one preseason game, which was the first one, and been out ever since. So I don't think he's anywhere near match level or match fit. I would be, I do think Yazbek and Acosta have a better chance of coming back. And then same thing with Schaffelberg. He was only listed as questionable, so I wouldn't be surprised of seeing him there.
And give
Oh,
me
you
your
want me to give you a score prediction?
yeah, that was that when I said, "Hey, do you give me the injury report and then plug in prediction?" That was kind of what I
You
was
didn't say
alluding to.
that.
I did
He
though.
did.
Oh, dang. Venmo me $5 for the score prediction. Anybody who wants to hear it. No, I'm just kidding. I had a Steven moment there. Don't you have SGMI or something? Anyway,
Give us your score prediction. What are
I
you
don't know. I'm
doing?
stalling. I don't know. I don't. And it's gonna be 1-0 loss. Red Bulls score 1-0. Emil Forsberg scores a penalty. That's it. And then go to 615soccer.com. Follow me at Valer Shabilla on Instagram, Twitter, and Blue Sky. There you go.
So first off, I just want to preface all of this by saying Valair is the one of us of all of us on this show. Valair is the one of us that has the reputation. So I just want to let you guys know he's the one that people look to for like Nashville SC as a trusted resource. That guy who just did that prediction.
Yes.
So I want to
That
preface
is that guy
that
who just did the past 30 seconds of not getting to a plug in prediction and then saying it was a me moment to try to deflect and gaslight me. Yes, he did all of that.
anyway, you can follow me at Clay Lasso on Instagram or on Twitter, of course. And you can also check out the National Soccer Archive. You can check out 615 Soccer. We would appreciate if you do that. Valair asks you to give him $5. I suggest instead of giving Valair $5, you give 615 Soccer $3 or $7, depending on your how much you want to support, and that way you can help get Nashville Soccer Media keep it going, keep it growing. So for my prediction, I am going to predict a draw because I need it to be a draw because I need to have Steven on this show next week, knowing that he already lost prop bets in week 2 for the entire season. So I'm going to say it will be a, we compared this season to, new starts for Nashville. And there's nothing that screams Nashville more than waiting 3 games to score your first goal of the season. And so I am going to say a scoreless draw at Red Bulls, but Nashville will have more shots and more possession than New York will have.
And then if you don't want to Venmo Valair $5 or give money to 615soccer.com, you can also give money to Kicking It 615 and support the kids playing soccer that can't afford to play. So make sure you go check out Kicking It 615. Obviously, we all love it. We support it very much.
.org.
.org. Thank you very much, Valair.
KI615.org.
Sorry, very much. Appreciate that. Make sure you go check that out and donate money to them instead of Valair because Valair doesn't need it. But the prediction I will give, because I have to give it, is a Nashville loss. I think it's going to be a 3-2 loss. I think it's going to be very close. I think we give up like a last-minute corner or something like that against Red Bull. I'm going to go the complete opposite of what we normally do. Instead of having a 0-0 draw, I will be there as well. I'm excited to make my first trip to New Jersey. So excited for that. But just want to thank you guys so much for listening to the show. Appreciate it. Obviously, we're going to be back with all of the content, all of the things. We're back to regular scheduled programming. I hope you guys are ready for it. There's no more breaks this season. We're here every week. So thank you guys again so much for listening to the show. We truly appreciate it. And we will be here next week to talk about Red Bulls.